So, I recently went through something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Imagine waking up one morning, taking that first sip of coffee, and realizing that the quiet piece of heaven you built with your own hands is about to be ripped away, because of an HOA you were never even part of. That's where my nightmare started, and I swear to you, it still feels like a bad dream I haven't quite woken up from. The mist hung low over the lake that morning, the way it always does when the world feels still and forgiving. I was standing barefoot on the dock with my coffee, the smell of fresh grounds and cedar mixing with the cool air. At 68, that dock was my church. It was where my late wife Sarah and I used to sit in the evenings, watching the water fold itself into the shore. Every nail in that cabin behind me was a memory, every plank a story. And then I saw it, bright, ugly, and so out of place against the calm gray morning that it sent a knot straight into my stomach. A neon orange notice, nailed right into the boathouse door. Not taped, not tucked under a handle. Nailed. I still remember the sound it made when I pulled it out, that wrong little pop as the nail tore from the wood Sarah had painted with her own hands. It already felt like a violation before I even knew what it said. I opened it and my chest tightened. Final notice, unpaid HOA dues, demolition scheduled. The header read Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association. I actually laughed at first, thinking this had to be some clerical mistake. My land sits a full half-mile outside that development. My grandfather's deed made it crystal clear. This cabin was ours, free and clear of anyone's rules. But there it was, in black and white, with a number so specific it almost tricked me into believing it. 11,740.26. And if I didn't pay, they claimed they had the right to destroy what Sarah and I had built. 3 days. That was the deadline. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Surely this was an accident. Some intern mixed up an address. These things happen, right? So I set my coffee down, called the number on the notice, and prepared to clear it all up with a polite little conversation. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was sweet, sugary, the kind of tone people use when they're about to sell you something you don't need. Lakeside Pines, this is Mara. How can I help you? I explained who I was, gave her the parcel number, and told her politely that I wasn't in her association. She tutted at me, like a schoolteacher correcting a child. Oh, Mr. Weller. Yes, I see your file right here. Looks like you're quite a bit behind. I felt heat rising in my face, but I held my ground. There are no dues. My property is not in your HOA. The county maps prove it. She sighed, slow and practiced. Well, according to our records, your parcel was annexed 6 weeks ago, following a community vote. I'm sure you received the paperwork. Don't you worry, I'll flag it as a clerical mix-up. It will all be fixed before any crew is scheduled to arrive. Her words were meant to reassure me, but the way she said community vote, the ease, the calmness, it was like she'd rehearsed it. Something slippery was hiding under that polished voice. Still, what choice did I have but to believe her? The next morning, the mist was gone. The sun was sharp, too bright, and that's when I heard it. The low rumble of a diesel engine and the heavy crunch of tires on gravel. My stomach turned before I even saw what it was. At the edge of my driveway sat a massive flatbed truck. On it was a backhoe, its arm folded like some sleeping insect ready to wake. A burly man in a reflective vest and hard hat climbed out. Clipboard in hand, no smile on his face. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tom Wellers." "I am's." He nodded. "Ted, foreman with HOA Demolition. We've got a work order to take down your boathouse. If the site's not cleared, we start on the cabin." He tapped his clipboard and then jerked his thumb toward the machine. "Or you give us a certified check for 12 grand. His words hit me like a hammer. Yesterday, Mara had told me it was a clerical error. Today, a 10-ton machine was sitting in my driveway, ready to tear apart the life Sarah and I had built. I stood there staring, my hands shaking just slightly. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a warning. This was an attack. I nodded slowly, trying not to let him see the storm raging inside me. "All right," I said, my voice rough. Let me make a phone call. I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and leaned against the wall. The silence was loud. I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't something I could fix with polite words. This was war. The deadbolt clicked into place, and for the first time in years, my house didn't feel safe. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I couldn't call the sheriff, not yet. Small-town law can get tangled with HOA politics. No, I needed someone who knew exactly how to deal with bullies who hid behind fake paperwork. So I called Dana, my oldest. She picked up on the first ring. "Dad, you okay?" Her voice was sharp, alert, like she already knew something was wrong. I told her everything, from the orange notice to the sugary woman on the phone, to the backhoe breathing diesel fumes 20 feet from my porch. I tried to keep calm, but my voice cracked halfway through. When I finished, silence stretched on the line. And then, Dana's tone changed. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was Special Agent Weller. "Dad, listen carefully," she said, each word clipped and deliberate. "Do not go back outside, don't talk to the foreman, don't acknowledge them at all, go to every window and take pictures, truck, backhoe, license plates, the man if you can. Then go to your file cabinet. Get your deed, your tax bill, the old survey. Photograph everything, every page, clear shots. Then email them to me. After that, drive straight to the county clerk's office. Ask for a certified copy of the plat map. Certified, Dad. That's your shield, do you understand me?" I swallowed hard, but her words steadied me. It was a checklist. I was a retired electrician, I understood checklists. "Yes," I said. "Good, do it now. I'll call you back when I have something. I love you, Dad." And then the line went dead. Fear drained out of me, replaced by something steadier: focus. My daughter had given me a mission. I moved quickly, snapping photos from every angle, zooming in on plates and faces. Ted, the foreman, was leaning against the truck now, smoking like he had all day to wait. He didn't know I was documenting him like evidence. And that's exactly what it was: evidence. In my office, I yanked open the old metal filing cabinet. Inside, under a tab labeled House, was the paper history of my family's land. My grandfather's original deed from 1962, my deed when I inherited it, the official survey from the year Sarah and I built the boathouse, lines bold and clear, hundreds of yards outside the HOA's reach. Proof. I laid them all on the kitchen table, took photos one by one, making sure the timestamp was stamped onto each image. It felt good to be fighting back, even in this small way. Then I drove downtown. The county buildings smelled of paper and floor wax, the kind of place where truth is buried in drawers and ledgers. At the records counter, a tired young clerk pulled up my parcel number. "This one right here," she asked, swiveling the monitor. I leaned in. There it was, my land, my cabin, my dock. And there, in a thick black line, the official HOA boundary stopping short, leaving my parcel untouched, unclaimed. Relief hit me like cool water. The truth, stamped in county ink. "I need a certified copy," I said, voice steady. She printed it, pressed the heavy stamp into the corner, and slid it across the counter. That piece of paper was more than ink and seal, it was my shield. I drove home with the map on the passenger seat like it was a trophy. And just as I turned down the road to my cabin, my phone rang. Dana again. "Dad," she said, and her voice was grim. "This isn't a mistake, it's a target." My grip on the wheel tightened. "What do you mean?" She exhaled. "I did a background check on your HOA president, Mara Jansen. This is a pattern. For 5 years, she's filed altered maps in other counties. Always the same trick: move a boundary line, file a fake vote, annex valuable land. 6 weeks ago, she filed one for your area. The community vote she mentioned, forged. She's a predator, Dad, and she set her sights on you." The words sank like ice in my gut. That syrupy voice I'd heard on the phone now replayed in my head, but darker, sinister. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, dressed up as paperwork. I pulled into my driveway. The backhoe was gone, the foreman too. For 1 second I thought maybe the certified map had scared them off. But then I saw him, standing half hidden by a tree on the road. A man in a Lakeside Pines shirt, camera in hand, telephoto lens aimed right at my window. Click, click, click. He was photographing my home, documenting violations that didn't exist. I froze on the porch, the certified map still clutched in my hand. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And that's when headlights appeared at the end of the drive. A black sedan rolled to a stop, and I knew before she stepped out. Dana, not just my daughter, a federal agent arriving at a crime scene. Dana moved with a purpose that only comes from years in the field. She hugged me quickly on the porch, but her eyes weren't on me. They were scanning the tree line, the road, the lake, always assessing, always protecting. "You did good, Dad," she said quietly, nodding at the photos I'd sent her. "The evidence is clean." 2 more cars pulled in behind her. Dark sedans, clean, official, my boys. Ray got out first. At 38, he carried the weight of Homeland Security in every step. Big frame, quiet movements. He scanned the perimeter like it was second nature. My middle son didn't waste words. His presence alone was enough to make a man think twice. Then Mark stepped out. The youngest, full of restless energy, a postal inspector who'd built his career untangling fraud and lies. He clapped me on the shoulder, gave me a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't worry, Dad," he said. "They just picked a fight with the wrong family. Mail fraud, wire fraud, Mara's swimming in both." In minutes, my oak kitchen table, the same one where they'd done homework as kids, was transformed into a command center. Laptops, maps, folders spread across its surface. It felt surreal. The place Sarah and I had built for peace now looked like a federal operation. Dana laid the certified plat map in the center, the one I'd gotten from the county clerk. "This is our foundation," she said, "the truth in black and white." Then she placed another map beside it. One filed 6 weeks ago. At first glance, it looked the same, but when Mark set a ruler across the two, the theft revealed itself. On Mara's version, the HOA boundary line curved just enough to swallow my property whole. My dock, my boathouse, my cabin. Ray's jaw tightened. She didn't just move a line, she stole your land on paper. Mark pulled out another document, and here's how she made it look legal. He slid over a single page. The so-called community vote Mara had bragged about. Signatures lined the bottom, neighbors I'd known for years. "Frank Miller," Mark said, tapping the first. "Died in 2018. Joan Peterson stroke, 2020, and Carl Beasley. He's been living in Florida for a decade." My chest ached. These weren't just names, they were friends. People who had once sat at this same table, shared meals, helped raise rafters when Sarah and I built this home. Mara had forged their names, desecrated their memory, just to get her claws on my land. We sat in silence, the weight of it filling the room. 3 papers lay in front of us. My original deed, Mara's forged map, and her fraudulent vote. Together they told the story of a predator dressed up as a neighbor. Then the rattle of my mail slot broke the silence. An envelope slid to the floor, stamped with the Lakeside Pines logo. Hand-delivered. Inside, a new bill. Second notice, fines doubled. The nearly $12,000 had been crossed out. Now it read $23,480.52. They added a fresh violation. Non-compliant exterior paint. The soft brown siding Sarah and I had chosen together 30 years ago was now apparently worth a $10,000 penalty. I carried it back to the table, laid it with the others. My kids stared at it, and I saw the same thing in their eyes, cold anger. This wasn't about paint. It wasn't about dues. It was about whether a life could be stolen with nothing more than lies printed on paper. I thought of Sarah, of what it meant to build something lasting. Ownership wasn't just paperwork, it was sweat, memories, love baked into every board. A line on a map couldn't erase that. The next morning they tried again. At 5:30 a.m., the crash of metal jolted me awake. I rushed to the window, heart racing. A massive dumpster now sat at the end of my driveway, blocking it completely. Rust red, spray-painted with property of Lakeside Pines HOA, debris removal. They were calling my life debris. Ray stood beside me, arms crossed, face like stone. They're boxing you in, Dad, making you feel helpless. But I wasn't helpless, not anymore. I grabbed my phone, opened the Notes app, typed the date and time. Then I took photos, dumpster, truck, license plate. Proof, evidence. My system was simple but solid. Mark studied the notice from the day before, tapping the name signed at the bottom. Greg Purcell, HOA Treasurer. He smirked. Let's see if Mr. Purcell feels like talking about his debris. He dialed the HOA number, put the call on speaker. A gruff, sleepy voice answered. Mark's voice was polite, even friendly. Hi, I'm calling on behalf of my father, Tom Weller. A large dumpster appeared in his driveway this morning. We're just looking to get it sorted out. A chuckle came through the line. Sorted out, you pay the fine, it gets sorted out. Simple. Greg Purcell, smug, enjoying his little moment of power. Mark stayed calm. We're confused about the fines. This property isn't even in your HOA. Greg laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. Says our paperwork you are, and until you pay up, things are going to get a lot more inconvenient. Mark leaned into the trap. We just want this to stop. My dad's an old man. We don't want trouble. We're thinking maybe he should just sell and move. Silence on the line. Then Greg spoke, dripping with satisfaction. Smartest thing I've heard all day. We'll make it so he wants to sell. A lot cheaper for him in the long run. Mark ended the call, eyes locking with mine. We had him. A direct admission. Harassment designed to force a sale. Dana's fingers flew across her keyboard. That's extortion, she said, her voice cold. Combined with mail and wire fraud, that's federal. But she wasn't ready to pull that trigger yet. First, we'd beat them with their own rulebook. By the time the sun came up, Dana had already drafted the letter. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a cease and desist, formal, ironclad, and dripping with the weight of law. Every violation was listed in black and white. The illegal blockade of my driveway, the forged maps, the fraudulent vote, the hand-delivered fines. And now Greg Purcell's recorded admission of harassment. She handed me the papers and looked me in the eye. This is how we start breaking them, Dad. Not with fists, with their own system. An hour later, the county sheriff himself pulled up at the end of my road. I'd known him 20 years. Honest man, the kind who never raised his voice unless he meant to end a fight. He got out, squinted at the dumpster blocking my driveway, and shook his head like he'd just stepped in something foul. We met by the road. I handed him Dana's letter. He read silently, lips pressed into a thin line, his face growing darker with each paragraph. Then he turned and walked straight toward the manicured entrance of Lakeside Pines. A few minutes later, she emerged. Mara Jansen. Perfect hair, bright smile frozen on her face. The sheriff didn't smile back. He handed her the letter. And the look that crossed her face when she read it, worth more than the $23,000 she claimed I owed. The sugary charm melted away, replaced by raw fury. 20 minutes later, the same truck that had delivered the dumpster came groaning back to haul it away. My driveway cleared as if the whole thing had never happened. Small victory, sweet but temporary, because bullies don't fold after one push. They come back harder. That night, I was just sitting down to dinner when my phone buzzed. A neighbor down the road. Tom, you need to check the HOA's Facebook page. I pulled it up and there it was. A photo of my cabin, the one the man with the telephoto lens had taken. Underneath, in bold letters, notice of violation, non-compliance, tagged with my name for the whole world to see. It wasn't enough to fine me. Now they wanted to shame me. Public stocks in the town square, 21st century style. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. My private fight had been dragged into the open. My name smeared for every neighbor to whisper about. But then the phone rang again. Bill from 2 roads over. Tom, I saw that post. It's garbage. They fined me $500 last month for a garden gnome. Said it wasn't in harmony with the natural woodland setting. An hour later, another call, Cheryl. They fined me because my welcome mat was half an inch too wide, she said, her voice trembling with anger. I thought I was the only one. And just like that, Mara's public shamming backfired. Instead of turning the neighborhood against me, it exposed her pattern. One by one, the people she'd bullied started speaking up. Dana leaned over her laptop, eyes sharp. This isn't about pride or power, Dad. It's about money, always money. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request, forcing the HOA to release 5 years of budgets, filings, and meeting minutes. A week later, the files arrived. Our kitchen table disappeared under spreadsheets and highlighters. Dana spent the whole day combing through numbers, muttering under her breath. At 4 in the afternoon, she leaned back with a low whistle. Found it. She turned the laptop toward me, a budget line under community maintenance. Over $500,000 spent in 5 years, but only half accounted for actual landscaping, road repair, snow removal. The rest, a vague category called General Contracting and Site Management. $218,000. No receipts, no invoices, just disappearing quarter after quarter. That's a slush fund, Ray said, his voice flat. Dana dug deeper, cross-referencing payments with the state's business registry. And there it was. The money funneled to a company called Jansen Contracting, owned by David Jansen, Mara's brother. It hit me like a hammer. All those fines, all that bullying, it wasn't just power. It was theft. She was bleeding the neighborhood dry to feed her own family. That night, my garage looked less like a workshop and more like a war council. Bill showed up, Cheryl too, and a young father whose son's tricycle had been declared not in harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic. 4 neighbors. Tired, angry, ready. We laid out the proof across my workbench. The forged map, the fraudulent vote, Greg's recorded admission, the financial records showing money funneled to Mara's brother. Piece by piece, the picture was clear. For the first time, I felt it hope, not just for me but for all of us. The fight wasn't mine alone anymore. But hope has a cruel way of arriving right before the next blow. The very next day, while I was gone for just 2 hours, I heard it before I even saw it. The sharp buzz of chainsaws. And when I turned down my road, my heart stopped. Where my boathouse had stood for 30 years, there was nothing but a pile of splintered wood and shattered memories. They'd done it. They'd taken it from me. I stumbled out of the truck, legs weak, lungs tight. The foreman, Ted, wouldn't look at me. He packed his tools in silence, motioned for his crew, and within minutes they were gone, leaving only wreckage. The dock where Sarah and I had watched the sunset, the walls we painted together, the roof we shingled with our own hands, it was all splintered and gone. I walked to the edge of what used to be my boathouse and sat down hard on the broken dock. The smell of raw, freshly cut wood hung in the air. My hand brushed across the jagged edge of a board and landed on something smooth. A photograph, faded. Sarah and me, smiling, covered in sawdust the summer we finished building. She held a hammer, I had my arm around her. We were proud then. Now all I could see was ash and ruin. For the first time since this war began, the fight drained out of me. Quiet, heavy, final, they hadn't just destroyed wood and nails. They'd destroyed a piece of my life I couldn't rebuild. Bill came running down the road, face stricken. Tom, I'm so sorry. We called the sheriff as soon as we saw them, but they were fast, and there's more. He swallowed hard. After the crew left, Mara's nephew came. He loaded all the salvage lumber, said it was his by right. Looted, stolen the bones of my past out of the rubble. I just sat there staring empty. No words, no fight left. My kids found me like that. Dana knelt, put a hand on my shoulder. Ray stood like stone, jaw tight. Mark stared at the wreckage, fury written across his face. None of them tried to comfort me with hollow words. They knew it was okay. They just stood with me in silence. After a long time, Ray finally spoke. His voice was gravel and steel. That's it, no more defense. We stop reacting. We start acting. I looked up at him, then at Dana, then Mark. They all wore the same look. This wasn't about a property line anymore. It wasn't about fines or notices. They'd hurt their father. They made it personal. And that was their mistake. That night, the kitchen table wasn't for legal documents. It was for strategy. Ray took lead. She can't help herself, he said. She's a bully, she needs control. She destroyed the boathouse, and now she'll watch to make sure you don't dare rebuild. We'll use that against her. The plan was simple but sharp. Step 1, bait. The next morning I drove to the hardware store, bought a stack of 2x4s and a sheet of plywood. Not enough to build, just enough to make it look like I was starting something new. I stacked it neatly on the dock, right where the boathouse used to be. Then I sat at the table with a pencil and ruler sketching fake plans. Detailed, convincing, little notes in the margins like reinforced foundation and exceeds code requirements. I left them spread across the workbench in the garage, perfectly visible through the window. Bait for curious eyes. Step 2, the trap. Ray placed 4 motion-activated cameras, each no bigger than a golf ball. One hidden inside a birdhouse overlooking the dock. Another under the garage eave aimed at the window where the fake plans lay. A third tucked into the hedge along the property line. And the last inside the cabin itself, watching over everything. They linked wirelessly to a secure server, feeds going straight to Ray's and Dana's phones. We'd know the second anyone stepped onto my land. For 2 days we waited. Tension wound tight. Every ping of motion set our hearts racing. A squirrel scurried across the dock. A UPS truck left a package. Bill's golden retriever sniffed the lumber. False alarms, nothing. By the 3rd day, I started to think maybe she'd had enough. Maybe destroying the boathouse was her endgame. Then Ray's phone buzzed. He lifted it, and the image froze me cold. Mara Jansen. She had parked her car up on the main road and was walking boldly down my driveway. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, snapping photos of the stacked lumber as if she owned it. She strode out onto my dock, inspected the wood, then headed straight for the garage, eyes locked on the window. Exactly as Ray predicted. She leaned closer, angling her phone to capture the fake plans. Trespassing, documenting, smug. And that's when I heard it, the low crunch of gravel. Tires, not one car, 2. Black SUVs rolling silently down the driveway, pulling to a stop, blocking her exit. The trap had sprung. She didn't hear the SUVs until they stopped. The quiet crush of gravel made her spin around, clipboard half raised like a shield. The smugness on her face melted into confusion, then into alarm. The doors opened. 3 figures stepped out of the first vehicle, dark suits, movements sharp and economical. Federal agents. The second SUV's passenger door opened, and Dana stepped out. Not in a suit, just jeans and a plain blue jacket, but she carried more authority than all of them combined. Calm, unshakable. Mara's face flushed red, her sugary charm collapsing into indignant rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped, her voice higher than usual. "This is private property, you're trespassing." Dana walked forward, slow and steady, stopping just a few feet away. "Mara Jansen," she said, her voice perfectly even, "while you are currently trespassing on my father's property, that's the least of your problems today." Mara's eyes flicked from Dana to the men in suits, to the SUVs, to the cameras Ray had hidden, catching every move. She was cornered and she knew it. Just then, another vehicle pulled in behind them, the county sheriff. He stepped out with deputies and a thick sheath of papers. He didn't look at Mara. He nodded once at Dana, then turned, walking straight toward Lakeside Pines' manicured entrance. Search warrants. Served on her home and her office at that exact moment. Mara's bravado faltered. She watched the sheriff and deputies vanish toward her pristine street, her mouth parting slightly. The illusion of control evaporated in the morning sun. "You can't do this," she stammered, voice shaking now. "I am the president of the Homeowners Association." Dana slipped her credentials from her jacket, held them open. No flourish, no theatrics, just fact. "Marla Jansen," she said, her tone stripped bare, the voice of the United States government. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched through the kitchen window as my daughter read a bully her rights on the very dock Sarah and I had built. The spot where 30 years of memories had stood before Mara reduced them to splinters. One of the agents stepped forward. Handcuffs gleamed in the sun. The crisp metallic click when they locked around Mara's wrists was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, louder than chainsaws, louder than demolition. It was the sound of justice. Her shoulders sagged. No screaming, no fighting. The sugary mask was gone. All that remained was a hollowed-out woman who realized too late she picked the wrong man to push. The case that followed was almost too easy. My kids had built an airtight record. The prosecution laid it all out like dominoes. The altered plat maps filed with the county. The fraudulent vote, signatures stolen from neighbors long dead. The hand-delivered notices, designed to skirt mail fraud. Mark testified with professional clarity about the tricks Mara used, how avoiding postage was itself a tell, an attempt to dodge federal oversight. Then came the emails. Dana's team had dug through her computers, uncovering the smoking gun. One message to Greg Purcell, sent the day I first called her office. The old man on the lake called. He knows the deed. Stall him, we need to make him sell before he figures it out. Don't worry about the law, we are the law here. That email sealed her fate. And the financial records. They showed $218,000 siphoned into Janssen Contracting, her brother's shell company. No receipts, no work done, just checks written and cashed. Finally, the video footage Ray's cameras had captured. Crystal clear shots of Mara trespassing, photographing my home, inspecting the decoy plans. Proof she wasn't just behind it, she was on the ground, orchestrating it herself. She had built a cage of fake rules, forged signatures, phony maps, and bogus fines, and we had locked her inside it with the very laws she thought she was above. The judge was no nonsense, the kind of woman who'd seen her share of HOA tyrants. She didn't just find Mara guilty, she made an example of her. Conspiracy, wire fraud, extortion, each conviction stacked like bricks in a wall Mara couldn't climb. Greg Purcell, the treasurer, saw which way the wind was blowing. He confessed everything in exchange for a lighter sentence, putting the final nail in Mara's empire. But the judge didn't stop there. Her restitution order was brutal. Mara had to pay me $64,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress. And this part made me smile. She ordered my boathouse fully rebuilt, at Mara's expense, using her personal assets, not HOA funds. And then came the final blow. The Lakeside Pines HOA board was dissolved on the spot, its charter revoked, control stripped away and handed to a court-appointed receiver. Mara's power was gone, her kingdom dismantled. All in one swing of the gavel. The gavel cracked down, and with it, the illusion of her kingdom shattered. Mara Janssen wasn't just guilty, she was finished. But what followed was bigger than just her downfall. Her case lit a fire across the county. At the next commissioner's meeting, her crimes were laid bare, and for the first time, the people in power had no choice but to act. They voted unanimously to pass a new ordinance. Every HOA in the county would now be subject to independent financial audits every 2 years. No more shadow budgets. No more unchecked slush funds. My fight had started as one old man trying to save his cabin. Now, it was changing the rules for hundreds of families who'd lived under the thumb of bullies like her. A month later, a different kind of truck rumbled up my driveway. Not a demolition crew, not a dumpster. A lumber delivery. Fresh cedar stacked high, the kind of wood that smelled like hope. Bill and Cheryl were the first to arrive, tool belts slung over their shoulders. Then the young father with the tricycle story. One by one, neighbors came. People Mara had fined, shamed, and harassed. They carried coffee, hammers, and a determination that felt stronger than any HOA rule ever written. We spent the weekend side by side, rebuilding what she had destroyed. The sound of saws and hammers rang across the lake, but this time, it wasn't destruction, it was creation. As I drove the last nail into the roof, standing in the same spot where Sarah once stood, I looked out over the water. Mist clung low across the surface, the same as it had the morning this nightmare began. Only this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like renewal. I paused, leaned on the hammer, and let the moment sink in. You can destroy wood. You can break glass. You can steal lumber. But you can't erase what people build together. That's the thing about bullies. They think control comes from rules they invent and fines they print. But real power isn't in paper. It's in people. In neighbors who decide they're tired of being afraid. In families who stand shoulder to shoulder and say, "Not anymore." As the last shingles settled into place, I pulled the faded photo from my pocket, the one I'd found in the rubble after the boathouse came down. Sarah, smiling, sawdust on her cheeks, hammer in hand. For a moment, I could almost hear her laugh carried by the breeze. "Looks good, doesn't it?" I whispered, and it did. That evening, we gathered on the dock. Not just my kids, not just my neighbors, everyone who'd been burned by Mara's games. We grilled burgers, passed plates, told stories about the ridiculous fines we'd faced. Someone joked about Cheryl's outlaw welcome mat. Even laughter felt like defiance. Dana leaned back in her chair, eyes on the lake, and said quietly, "Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a community deciding to be free." I nodded. She was right. The courtroom had ended Mara's reign. But it was here, on this dock, with my neighbors beside me, that I felt truly free again. The boathouse stood tall behind us, cedar planks glowing in the setting sun. It wasn't just rebuilt. It was reborn, stronger, straighter, a symbol of something greater than one man's fight. And as the mist rolled back in over the lake, I thought of all the lines Mara had tried to move. On maps, on paper, in people's minds. But there are lines you can't fake, can't bend, can't vote away. You can't vote against gravity, and you can't hide from the truth. Because the truth always comes out. And when it does, it pulls you back down to earth, harder than you ever imagined. The weeks that followed felt different, quieter. The constant hum of threat was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not just the peace of a calm lake at sunrise, but the kind that comes when a storm finally breaks and leaves clear skies behind. I'd wake in the mornings, pour my coffee, and step onto the dock. The mist would curl low over the water, soft and gray, and for the first time since that orange notice appeared, I could breathe. The cabin stood whole. The boathouse stood taller than before, and I stood knowing I wasn't alone anymore. One evening, I sat on the new dock with Dana, Ray, and Mark. My kids, my protectors, my family of federal agents who had turned my quiet cabin into a fortress of truth when I needed it most. Ray leaned back, arms crossed, eyes on the water. "Funny thing," he said, "bullies always think they're untouchable, but they all make the same mistake. They forget someone, always watching." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, and in Mara's case, someone was recording too." He patted the phone where Greg Purcell's confession was still saved. Dana didn't laugh. She just looked at me, her expression soft but strong. "Dad, you fought longer than most people would have. You didn't fold. You stood your ground. And because of that, none of us will ever have to bow to someone like her again." Her words sank into me like the cedar planks beneath our feet. For months, I'd felt like I was just barely surviving, holding on while they tried to tear everything away. But she was right. Standing firm, even when it nearly broke me, had changed everything. Not just for me, for everyone. The neighbors came by often now. Bill with his endless stories, Cheryl with her sharp wit, even the young father who finally painted his kid's tricycle bright red out of spite. The fear that once kept them quiet was gone. They weren't living under an HOA's thumb anymore. They were free. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory. Not the restitution Mara had to pay, not even the rebuilt boathouse, though every board carried meaning. The real win was the community that rose from the ashes. People who finally looked each other in the eye and said, "We deserve better." The law had caught up with Mara. Justice had its day, but what truly destroyed her was truth. Piece by piece, paper by paper, voice by voice, we'd built something stronger than any rulebook she could write. I looked at the photograph I kept in my pocket, the one of Sarah and me, young and proud, sawdust on our clothes, hammer in her hand. She would have laughed at all this. Not because it wasn't hard, but because she always knew I was stubborn enough to fight, even when it seemed impossible. I held it up to the fading light. "We rebuilt it, Sarah," I whispered, "and we rebuilt us too." The water rippled softly, catching the glow of sunset. My kids were still talking behind me, neighbors' laughter carrying across the lake. The world felt right again. That's the thing about home. It isn't just walls or a roof. It isn't just wood and nails. Home is the people who stand with you when the bulldozers come. Home is the fight you don't give up, even when the odds are stacked against you. And sometimes, home is the place where truth finally wins. So if you've ever felt small, cornered, or crushed by people who make their own rules and expect you to obey, remember this: the truth is heavier than any lie. Lies can bend paper. They can even break wood. But the truth always stands. Just like my cabin, just like my boathouse, just like me. And in the end, the bullies who thought they were the law learned the oldest law of all. Karma always comes. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.